Could you say about
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, October 4th, 2021. This is your reminder that this meeting is being electronically recorded. This time we'll start with our business agenda, and for that we will start with the Student Advisory Council around Attleboro updates.
Good evening. This week's All Around Attleboro segment contains important information regarding the beginning of October.
Ella Lynch Bartek and Neil Chase were named National Merit Commended Scholars. This distinction is shared by only 3% of the seniors in the country. Lily Bodeker and Alex Vecchioli were selected as Athletes of the Month of September. Hyman Fine Elementary School is having their PTO meeting on October 7th at 6 p.m. All elementary schools are having an early release day on October 8th. And students also have Monday, October 11th off for Columbus Day. Hill Roberts is having their PTO meeting on October 12th. And the Early Learning Center is having their Welcome Back Night on October 13th. Studley Elementary School is having their PTO meeting on October 13th as well. Hill Roberts Elementary School is hosting their book fair for October 18th through October 22nd. Hill Roberts Elementary School is also having their Evelyn Silva Memorial Art Gallery, which is Alice Fenton Lightfoot. Wamsutta Middle School is running their book fair until October 8th, and students can buy from a great selection of books and other art supplies and school supplies. All Attleboro Middle Schools are having an early release day on October 8th, and the Wamsutta PTO is having their meeting on October 8th at 6:30 p.m. This is a great way for parents to get involved with their school community. All middle schools are having Monday, October 11th off for Columbus Day.
For the high school, Attleboro High School also has an early release day on October 8th, and all Attleboro public schools have Monday, October 11th off for Columbus Day. The PSAT exam is on October 13th, and it's a great opportunity for sophomores and juniors to get a taste of what the SAT will be like. Financial Aid Night is happening on October 14th and will be happening in both English and Spanish. Spirit Rally is happening on October 15th and is a great chance for students to dress up in their class colors to represent their grades. Sign-ups for each event are with your class council advisors, and freshmen are blue, sophomores are white, juniors are blue, and seniors are white. The homecoming football game is on October 15th and will be a great chance to watch the Blue Bombardiers take on the Mansfield Hornets at 7 p.m. Homecoming is October 16th from 7 to 10, and tickets are $20 and will be on sale in the Student Activities Office in the B3 cafeteria from October 5th and 6th and October 12th through the 14th. Permission slips are now available in each house office. The Marching Band Show is happening in Dartmouth, Mass. On October 23rd at 3 p.m. The First Generation College Student Night is happening at some point in October, and more information will be shared at a later date. Lastly, senior photos are due December 4th, and Chestnut Hill will be visiting Attleboro High School if you would like your pictures taken then. More information is in this week's Blue Mail from Mr. Rooney. Lastly, for community engagement, the Attleboro Schools Store's website is now open. Show your blue pride by shopping for new apparel and merchandise. Yearbooks are also available for pre-order, and if parents would like to put an ad in for their student, you will be able to do so here. This concludes our segment on all around Attleboro. Thank you.
Thank you both very, very much. Well done. Thank you. Moving on, in our business agenda tonight, next we have our superintendent's report. Sawyer?
Thank you, Chairman Withers. I have a couple brief updates for the committee this evening. First, I wanted to review what I've already sent as the mask requirement changes that DESE announced last week. As you know, the mask requirement, which was initially set to last through October 1st, has been extended to November 1st. And they've made it very clear that they'll be reevaluating between now and then to decide whether at that time they have to extend it again. So we've been put on notice to anticipate that that's a possibility. I want to clarify that if and when the state removes the mask requirement, that the school committee policy that you enacted this August would take effect and be the rules for the district at that point. The mask requirement being a state requirement supersedes that at this time, but if at any point they make a change, then we would immediately be following the policy as written back in August. I think the most contentious part of the announcement this last week was the vaccination exemption, pushing that. They originally said that starting October 1st, districts could look to change the requirement in schools that made an 80% threshold. That has now been pushed back to October 15th. They made it very clear that whether or not we're meeting the 80% threshold is a local decision that should be made in conjunction with our local health department. It is a school-by-school decision, not a district decision. So given that at this time only the high school has all of its grades covered by vaccinations, it's safe to say that only the high school is conceivably going to make that 80% threshold until the vaccination status for younger kids changes, which is imminent, but it's going to take a while for those numbers to come up. So the only real consideration at this point is whether Attleboro High School meets 80%. As I've sent numbers along as we go, we have as a city not hit 80%, so it's unlikely that the high school has. But to be clear, we don't really have a high school specific number, and it's the entire school, not just the students. So to calculate that number, we would have to figure out the exact vaccination status of every student in the school and all the staff, and then figure out whether or not that's 80% or not. Based on the data that we have, there's no real reason to believe that we're quite there, but we are close. We're in the mid to high 70s. I'd like to point out that under this exemption that the state is offering, there is still an unvaccinated requirement. Right, so districts that pursue this, they're going to be having a situation in which people who are vaccinated are allowed to not wear their masks in schools that have made that 80% threshold. But the students in those schools that are still unvaccinated will be still required to wear a mask, which is different from the policy that you voted on and improved, which was to strongly recommend a mask. So I have a real strong concern that the state's policy puts educators, once again, right in the middle of trying to figure out who's supposed to be wearing a mask and who is not, and that the enforcement of that policy would require teachers to be forever fighting with who in the room is supposed to be wearing a mask and not wearing a mask, and forget trying to figure that out in hallways where kids are mixing and it's not not necessarily students that you particularly know. So for all of these reasons, I wanted to make a recommendation to you this evening. I just want to start by saying no one is as eager as I am to get to a place where we can get back to school as we know it. It's been really heartening in my tour of the district. I've been in schools right from the get-go. I'm starting to go around on second and third visits to schools, and everyone I talk to talks about how things feel much better this year because as much as it's not like real school quite yet, it's recognizably like school. We're doing things that we couldn't do before because with the distancing gone, kids can work in groups, and there are all kinds of instructional choices that teachers can make that weren't available to them last year. And so it feels a lot better. But as much as that's true, there's no question that masks get in the way of us doing our best work. So we are eager to get to a place where we can safely say that kids don't have to wear masks. Now, for the younger kids who, none of them are vaccinated, I think we're a ways away from being able to say that, but, we'll await state guidance as always. But for the high school kids, we are getting close to that. And so, I very much want to be able to say that. But in terms of pursuing this October 15th exemption, it's my recommendation that we pass on that and wait for the state to just end the requirement, the mask requirement entirely, and then that way we can follow the policy as you had approved this summer. My reasoning for this is that determining the rate for AHS will be a challenge to us. Now, it's not challenging as in we don't know how to do it. It's just it's going to take quite a bit of work for someone to go through and figure out that vaccination status. And there are multiple ways to do it, but none of them are particularly pleasant. The kinds of people who have, one of the ways is to go into the state system and go student by student and record what their vaccination status is. The problem with that is that our nurses are already overtaxed dealing with all the fallout from close contacts and test and stay and all those other things that we're doing to try to keep kids in school. So I'm not sure that's really the best use of our nurses' time. As I've already mentioned, I really worry about our capacity to enforce the requirement that unvaccinated students not wear masks. I mean, the unvaccinated students wear masks. And lastly, as I've already talked about, I think it'll be a real disruption to the learning environment to have teachers have to focus on who's wearing a mask and whether or not that student is vaccinated or not, rather than just being focused on teaching. I'm hopeful that based on the trends of the virus, that the period between when the 15th comes and when the state lifts the requirement might be short enough that it doesn't even matter. I mean, it is conceivable that we don't even get to 80% before the state lifts the mandate, in which case my recommendation is moot. But I just wanted to get ahead of this and let the committee know that if you want us to prepare for the ability to ask the health department to help us make a determination upon reaching 80%, you should certainly direct me to do so, because it would be my preference to not even pursue that.
So without our instruction, or without a vote from us instructing you to do so, that the 80% would be moot at this point? We wouldn't be, I've always looked at it as we're trying to get to 80%, so as many kids as possible cannot wear masks. We don't need, I think that should be our goal, for all the students to not being wearing masks as soon as possible. We don't need to get into the merits of mask wearing and whether or not it's necessary again. But if we're at a high school where we have 80% of the 80% of the school body vaccinated, the benefits of not wearing a mask, in my mind, certainly outweigh any administrative concerns of dealing with what would be required in getting that information and enforcing it.
It's less about the information, although I do want to be clear that there's going to be a certain amount of work that has to be done to make that calculation accurately. It's much more about the implications for the classroom, where teachers will have to know which students are vaccinated, which aren't, and enforce that the ones that are not vaccinated be wearing a mask, and that determination and the interactions with students are a complete distraction of learning and will cause, I think, tension in some cases between students and teachers. That if we were talking about a lapse of months, I might see it a little bit differently, but I remain optimistic that, again, I think there's a chance we don't even get to 80% before we see the requirement lifted. But as I started with the whole thing, I agree with you. I think getting to a place where we're not required to wear masks is where we want to be, but we have to be able to do that safely. And if we have a policy in which students that are unvaccinated must wear a mask, then we have to enforce that, and I have serious reservations about our ability to do so.
How, because we're talking about the high school, and high school teachers have, several different classes a day. But if we're talking about, essentially, 80% would be vaccinated, a class of 20, obviously it's different from class to class, but that means there'd be, 4 students in a class that potentially weren't vaccinated. Is it that onerous for a teacher to know, in period 1 who the 4 students in his or her class are that aren't vaccinated? I'm asking honestly, I don't mean to be glib about it. It just doesn't seem to me like that would be a major hurdle. I can understand the enforcement and maybe students causing friction with students, but I guess knowing who is, if you look at it as knowing who is unvaccinated, and it's 20%.
Yeah, so most of our teachers teach 4 classes a day, so, the 4 or 5 students times 4, it's keeping track of upwards of 20 students over the course of the day. Is that onerous? No, but it's certainly a distraction from what needs to be done. And, compliance with rules like this at the high school level gets really, really tricky. I mean, we already are, if you spend time in the high school, and I have had the opportunity to do that, you see a lot of kids already riding the line, walking down the hall with the mask, just below their nose. You go into classrooms, you see kids who are also testing, what their teacher is going to allow or not allow. And to be constantly policing that with students in your room is a complication that I don't wish to put teachers in that position, but I agree with you that we do want to, get to a place where we don't have to worry about this at all. So it's a tough thing to weigh from my perspective.
Mr. Domenici?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I know the guidance has changed, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this because the dates are a little different. My understanding was that come November 1st, the mask requirement is for all is dropped, but only provided you have the 80% or higher. Otherwise, you're still at masks. Are we saying that the masks are dropping into, because like the timeline of October 15th to November 1st then wouldn't make any sense to me.
I thought it was October 15th we could start to opt out. No, originally October 1st it went away. And now it goes away on November 1st, but they'll probably extend it again.
so-
But
so-
as of October 15th, we could submit to the state, correct me if I'm wrong, paperwork or whatever saying, look, we've hit 80% of the high school, we're opting out.
Well, I think an interesting point's being raised here. My recommendation is predicated on the assumption that when they abandon the mask requirement, they abandon the entire language of it and just go back to life without a mask requirement. But you're right, they could just as easily.
Yeah, I didn't see. That's the part I read it differently. I read that after a certain point in time, you could kick in the 80% rule or apply for it. Otherwise, you are still required to wear masks.
Under the mask requirement.
Right, but they might get rid of the mask requirement on November 1st if they do nothing. Again, they'll probably act again, but my understanding is if they do nothing, the mask requirement goes away on November 1st.
That is my understanding.
Mr. Storrs?
Like Mr. Domenici, I thought it was that if, when we get to the deadline, 80%, then their requirement goes away and it's up to the school committees, just like we already voted. We already made our motion, we already voted that for the high school we would encourage it but not enforce it. I don't want to see us start enforcing it where that anybody walking down the hallway says, oh, that kid's wearing a mask, why not just put a scarlet U on the mask, because now you're going to be creating the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated as they're walking down the halls. The idea before was, you want to wear a mask, that's up to you, that's great, but we're not going to enforce it, we're going to encourage it but not enforce it. That means everybody is under the same policy. This would be creating two different.
So to be clear, under the mask requirement, there is an exemption for schools that have 80% as of October 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we're operating under the mask requirement, if we pursue that 80% threshold, then the kids that are not vaccinated absolutely must wear a mask.
You're saying once we hit October, you are 100% positive that if we hit 80%,
Yep.
the unvaccinated would still have to wear a mask.
Under the state's requirement, that is my understanding of it, yes.
Okay, because when I read the updated, it didn't. I don't think it said that. It just said you hit 80%, then you can put in so that it no longer applies.
For the vaccinated,
I don't know if it
that's
actually specified.
that's the difference.
Yeah, I think
As
that's why
long
we
as
need
there's
the
a mask
clarification.
mandate, as long as there's a mask mandate, which there is right now through November 1st, if you don't opt out, everyone wears a mask. But if you opt out, only the vaccinated don't have to wear a mask.
Did it specifically state that?
I'm pretty sure it did, yeah.
I think we should just clarify that, because for because I spoke with someone over the weekend, they teach at Needham, and already their building is at 96% vaccination rate, but they're still required to wear the masks until November 1st. But after that, because they have the 96% vaccination rate, then those 96% do not have to wear a mask if they are vaccinated. So that's, I think, the clarification. I think November 1st comes and goes.
It
and if-
explicitly states that the unvaccinated have to wear a mask under this requirement.
I think under any requirement, the unvaccinated has to wear a mask. My question was whether or not, after November 1st, if we don't hit the 80% threshold, if everyone still has to. And that's the part I think we need to clarify, because if folks went to
They
the
haven't
extra
they haven't
step,
decided yet.
haven't determined that yet.
yeah, that's
But we still have the issue of, if we hit 80%, do we want to instruct the administration to implement the policy where the vaccinated students don't have to wear a mask?
I'm reading the
I
letter
would-
now, you're right.
yeah,
It
and I-
says vaccinated individuals.
I mean, I would say if a student, if students have gone to that length to get vaccinated, then they shouldn't have to wear a mask if we as a school district, as a school, hit 80%. The benefits of not wearing masks are significant, and they're vaccinated. They can still wear one if they're concerned, but they shouldn't have to. Mr. Guttis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happen to agree with Mr. Sawyer. I think trying to enforce this, I think there's better ways that our educators can be using their time during the day. But I did have one clarifying question. If I'm not mistaken, for us to apply for a school building, it has to be 80% for everyone in the building. So it's not 80% of students. So
It's 80% of everybody, but our staff rates are high enough that that's only going to help us.
right, that was my question. So theoretically, we could be at 99% of our educators and 99% of our staff are vaccinated, which means only 75% of the students, right? In theory, like, I'm throwing out example numbers here, but
Yeah.
So
so
it still need to be higher, but yes, it could be under 80%.
It even talks about central office would apply in our situation. So.
right, and but going back to the example of, in a 20-person classroom, it may not just be 4 or 5 students, it may be closer to 6 or 7, depending on the classroom.
Mr. Larson?
I think the fact that the 15th is only 8 school days away, I think what makes sense, I mean, I agree with the superintendent. I think come November 1st, with a little luck, we're going to have a new set of rules. But I also think that we should start positioning ourselves so that on the 1st of November, we can start to have most of the information together, so that if, in their infinite wisdom, they decide to extend it again, which is a very real possibility, that we could be ready to go and apply for the 80% on November 1st. And I think if we, in fact, we decide to go down that road, we've all got to decide that no one's going to police this. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. I don't think anybody around this table wants to put the teachers in a position where they're going to have to keep track of 3 or 4 kids. So if we really want to head down this 80% road, I think we need to come to terms with the fact that that's just not going to happen, because I don't think that's right for the teachers. If we head down that road, let's get the masks off. People that are uncomfortable, they're going to wear masks anyhow. We don't even have to tell them that they need to wear masks. And the kids who aren't vaccinated, they should wear masks, but I don't think it's right to put the teachers in that position to have to enforce this crazy regulation. But I think trying to do something between now and the 15th for a couple thousand people is unrealistic. But let's start to position ourselves, in my opinion, for November 1st. So if it doesn't go away, we can be ready to go couple days after that for the 80% exemption, and just get this thing behind us.
I mean, I would disagree. I mean, I think if we pass that, the teachers absolutely need to enforce it. We can't pass a regulation and say,
I think that's
just ignore it.
unrealistic.
I mean, maybe it's unrealistic in the hallway, but it's not unrealistic for teachers to know 6 kids in their class that aren't wearing a mask and require that they do so. I mean, teachers know their students. That's why students have the success they do, because their teachers care and they know the students in their classroom. I mean, there's also the issue of wanting to encourage, I think, positive behavior here. I mean, what message are we're sending a good message to our students and to our staff if we're saying if we get to 80%, you're not going to have to wear a mask. Isn't that what we want to be encouraging anyway as a community and as a school district? Get vaccinated. Let's get on with this. And I think that's another reason why I think it would be important to opt into this opportunity through the state. And I just also I see no reason to think that the state won't extend it past November 1st with how they've handled this all along. Mrs. Storrs?
I agree with you. I think it's moot. I think the state's going to extend it. But in relation to what you said, my worry is there's definitely some students out there, for whatever reason their family feels that their student shouldn't get vaccinated because of health reasons or other things of that nature. And for us to actually say, hey, everybody else, you can take your mask off, but you, because you have a medical issue, cannot take your mask off. So we're going to actually discriminate against you. And I know it's not us. I know it's the state's policy. But we'd be making the decision to allow that discrimination to happen. I don't know, it's a very fine line, because not every student or parent who's deciding that their student should not get vaccinated, some of it is actually for a real reason, a medical related reason.
Right, and in that case, the student would may be wearing a mask anyway. I mean, we require vaccines. We've required vaccines, forever in schools. There are religious and health exemptions, which I'm sure would be in place here, but
for vaccines that actually stop the disease. Yeah, I agree.
Mr. Rooney.
I just wanted to offer an additional perspective to support the superintendent's stance. One of the things that we really struggled with from March 13th of 2020 through the end of that 1920 school year was the fact that we have a lot of classes that change at the trimester, and that was right around the end of the second trimester. And the remote learning for the rest of that 1920 school year was extremely difficult because those teachers did not know those students, and so the relationship building was non-existent. And one of the lessons that we learned from that we really tried to focus on at the high school last year during the 2021 school year was an emphasis on relationship building. There are a lot of studies out there that show that the better relationship that a teacher has with their students, the more learning takes place. And I do have a fear that, and again, it would not be onerous. We could have a process probably through Aspen where there would be a list where a teacher could look at for the couple of minutes before class starts. But I worry about that adversarial relationship and that eroding some of the relationship building that we've been working on in those particular classes.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rooney, just to confirm, so the trimester change happens give or take a week before Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving?
It's immediately after Thanksgiving this year.
Okay.
And then roughly St. Patrick's Day is your second trimester change.
Thank you.
I mean, it still feels to me like punishing the students who have done the right thing and the families who have done the right thing and gotten vaccinated, because you don't want to cause tensions with students and families who've decided not to. And again, I understand Ms. Storrs' point that there are some with religious or health reasons why they do not, but there are also some that just are not getting vaccinated and should. And if we're going to move past this, we're going to get vaccinated as a community, and this is a way to to give another carrot to those who may be on the fence to get vaccinated. I just think it would be crazy not to take this opportunity. Mr. Domenici?
Just a thought, and then I have a question. The thought being, this could be more of an opportunity to encourage the testing, because that's the more numbers we have, the more positive, participation in the testing. Then we have pure data that states, what we're looking at in the schools. My question is, when we voted on our own decision as a school, our own policy, we put a limit on that to revisit, and I think it's right around that time where we would have to make a decision, as Mr. Larson says anyway. So if we're getting prepared for November 1st, we should also be taking a look at the policy we created as well, because I think right around that November timeframe is when we were going to revisit that as well. That was not a full year policy commitment. I believe we agreed to.
Right. But we're also not going to have any data on how it has worked because we haven't been able to do what, you know.
I know, but I didn't think we made it conditional on data.
No, we didn't. We didn't. I agree. But I think looking at it again, you know, is going to be a little bit of a fruitless and worthless exercise because we won't know anything else because we've been forced to be masked by the state anyway. But yes, we need to take it up in November.
If I'm saying that for the purpose that if the state doesn't actually do what we think it may do and it comes back to us as a local decision, we told our community that we would be revisiting that after 3 months, and so we should.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, really what this question is about the 80%. Because it sounds like maybe this committee would want to make a decision based on the 80% if we're there. If we're not there, it's moot. So really the question is, do we want to, you know, direct?
I don't think it's much of a question.
Right. You know where I'm heading. So pretty much, do we
Yeah,
want
so
you to check?
I think this conversation is fruitful, even though I don't think there's anything to do in this moment. Clearly, the administration needs to come back with you and give you calculate the rate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the sense that there's necessarily an agreement by any means that we would go forward with, you know, what I believe we should do. I don't necessarily get that sense, but I do think that there's a consensus that we should know that information.
Well, I think you wish to consider it once we get there, but we can't consider it unless I tell you that we're there.
Right.
So I need to tell you where we are.
Yep.
So, message received.
Okay. Mr. Larson.
I'm just thinking we have a wonderful opportunity on the other side of the table if they'd like to chime in on our conversation, because part of the reason for having you here at the table and part of our crazy conversations is also to get your input on it. So if there's anything you'd be willing to share or would like to share, this would be a great opportunity.
In my opinion, I feel like our masks right now, I feel like we've been to school for a couple months. We're used to having this on our face. I am vaccinated, so I'm fine either way, wearing a mask when the mandate's off or keeping it on when the mandate's not over. Do you have anything to add?
I just think that we have to take into consideration how the testing program would work, and as you guys mentioned, how making it more of a, let's make sure more people are in the test and stay program, more people doing the pool testing, just so you can see where the numbers are coming from and all that data before you make an official decision off of it.
Thank you. Mr. Domenici.
Yeah, I had one follow-up question. Each week in your update, you provide us the numbers of positive tests as well as close contacts. Is there any way of knowing now with test and stay, how many of those, are those close contacts that are in or not in the test and stay? It would be good to know, because you see those numbers and you're like, oh, 70 close contacts, but maybe 50 of them are in the test and stay program, which means there's a good chance they're all, or most of them, are still in school. So I don't want to add additional bureaucracy, but I'd be curious to know that number.
It would require a whole nother
Okay.
thing to have an accurate number, but I can tell you anecdotally that the vast majority of students who are put into a close contact situation are either in testing already and have provided consent, or in that moment when we call and say, got bad news for you, we offer to provide consent verbally in that moment. And you know, I would say it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of families say yes in that moment.
Okay. I just think it adds a little layer.
So the number of kids who are really being quarantined
are small.
Is much smaller.
Yeah.
As a result of test and stay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Carry on.
Okay. So this leads right into the next agenda item, which is testing. We finally did begin last week. I'll leave all my editorializing to the side and just tell you that last week we had 4 positives. On Friday I reported 3 positives, but we actually received a late addition, so it turned out to be 4 for the week that we worked out this weekend. So, you know, in a district of, you know, almost 6,000 students, you know, 4 positive cases were discovered. Another 6 were discovered through community testing, right? So people have exposed close contacts through their regular lives. They went to the doctor, they got tested, and they were positive as well. So, you know, 10 total. That's a pretty good number. It's down from where we were just a couple weeks ago, and there's a lot of chatter about, you know, this crest finally falling and that we're going to start to see dropping numbers. I hope that that's true. So the good news is we're finally up and running. It's not without some issues, but at least we're doing it, and we're producing results, which is what this is all about. Participation, as I told you on Friday, is under 50%. It's at 46%. Frankly, I find this number disappointing. One of the things that we were told last year was the obstacle, a barrier to participation, was how onerous the process was. It was, you had to go into Aspen. Aspen's not user-friendly. I certainly knew that was true, but this year it isn't. That is not the case. And as we've talked about, if any of you have provided consent, you know that it literally could not be easier. You hit that link, you put in a little bit of information, and you're off to the races. It's a much easier process. So that's no longer the case. We also now have test and stay, which is very popular with people who are a close contact, but convincing people that it's worth putting in advance, we're still not seeing much of a return on that. And quite frankly, we're having all kinds of arguments about what good policies are. I think a lot of the things that we disagree with as a society about how to handle this pandemic, whether, we all have our opinions, but a lot of it, there's at least something to consider on the other side of the argument. I have to be honest, I know of no rational argument against participating in testing. Whereas I do understand that there are other viewpoints on some of the other things that we fight about. I don't understand why this is a question. It's non-invasive, and we're not engaging in many of the things that the other things that we talk about lead to. So without bringing up all the politics, I find it very frustrating because ultimately this is the best tool we have to ensure that we have a safe learning environment, right? It tells us where the positives are in the district. It gives us a sense of how much virus there is in the schools, and it helps us to prevent it from spreading. So this is important data on actual conditions, and it informs our decision making. When we make a decision about whether or not to go with 80% or not, I got to tell you, if our participation rate was closer to 80%, I'd feel a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, let's drop the masks, let's do it, because I know that if we have positive cases in the schools, we're going to catch them quickly, we're going to stop them from spreading, and it seems like a much safer thing to me. Where participation remains so low, it worries me that we have a blind spot. That's an unnecessary one. It's an unforced error, and so we're going to continue to promote this. I'm going to be working with principals tomorrow about remessaging again, and we're going to try to get participation up because of all the things we control, this is something we can do here locally that helps to keep our kids safe and helps us to provide good information so that we can get through this thing as painlessly as possible.
Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, and I know we've said it a number of times, but in case there are 10 more people watching us on AACS tonight, opting into testing isn't just the routine testing. Someone that has opted into the routine testing, if they are identified as part of a close contact pool, then when they go, they can just be tested and be back in the classroom for test and stay.
Yes.
Rather than the student that has to go down, talk to the nurse has to make the phone call to a family member. That family member isn't available. Now the student is sitting in the nurse's office for an hour until someone calls back. So there's that, rather than waiting to go into test and stay and opt in, just registering, it covers all testing.
So technically we're not supposed to test, we're not supposed to allow people to do test and stay if they haven't provided consent ahead of time.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly. But the thing is that so we've been fudging this in the interest of keeping kids in school because that's what we're here to do.
Right.
Unfortunately, as we actually get into the system as it's designed to work, we're now having all kinds of problems that what we were pulling off because the system wasn't fully up and running yet, we were getting away with it. But now there are all kinds of obstacles. The system's not set up to do what we're doing. And so I have a meeting, I think tomorrow, it's later this week, to really work through whether we can continue to do that or not. So we might very quickly come to a place where if we don't have it ahead of time, you're not going to have that as an option.
So either way, just opt in and save
that protects you.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify one other thing. Early on when we talked about test and stay, we were promoting the benefits that it wasn't just about being a close contact through routine testing, which is a huge number of our close contacts. since then, one, the state's reversed course and told us not to do anything except the close contacts. But we've, again, been fudging on that because we want to keep the kids in school. But the health department, when in talking to them, they've really urged us to not allow students who are close contacts because of a case in the household to do test and stay. So we have stopped doing test and stay for in-household close contacts. And the reason for that is that, and I have to say, based on my own experience watching these cases in the district for the last year, that's where most of the transmission in Attleboro happens, is within households. Someone in the household gets it however they get it, and then everyone in the household eventually gets it. It's very rare that people escape that. So because we know there's so much spread within households, we're not doing test and stay for households because we feel like there's just a really high chance that we're going to see a positive case there. But we are still fudging on the close contacts that happen outside of the school. So if you are a close contact because you were in a dance class with someone tested positive, we are currently still doing the test and stay for those students, which again, originally the state said we could do that. They've since told us to stop doing it, and we're just being testing rebels and refusing to stop doing it because, again, we want the kids in school. So until the state comes in and wraps us on the knuckles, we're going to continue to do that one.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's clear everybody knows that I'm ready to get rid of the masks. I think that's pretty clear. But in relation to what Mr. Withers was saying about those who are doing the right thing and rewarding them or what have you, and with what you just said, I mean, one of the reasons why, if we're at the 80%, that I think that we could make this kind of decision is because we have this pool testing. We have this testing. And it almost seems like the students that are in the testing and are vaccinated are the ones that should be, to use Mr. Withers' term, rewarded. Meaning, maybe when the time comes, if we get there, that should be part of the discussion. Maybe those who are in the pool testing and vaccinated are the ones that should be able to get rid of these. And those who are not, that's part of the discussion that I think we need to have. So, again, I think that would spur a little activity in that realm.
Whatever we can do to get the numbers up.
Right. But we're not there yet.
Okay, just quickly, two other quick things. On Friday, I believe it was Friday, I informed you all that we were included in a lawsuit. DESI's the main defendant, but many districts across the Commonwealth were included as well. I just wanted to provide the one update that currently the whole thing is the state is trying to consolidate all these cases because some of the cases are in different counties based on where those schools are. And so the Attorney General's office is working on consolidating all of these various cases into one case that would be held in one county. So they're in the process of arguing that point. And I will let you know if anything else comes from it. But for the community that's wondering what I'm talking about, we were part of a lawsuit around mask requirements. And that's why DESI is the main defendant, because obviously the mask requirement theirs is more stringent than ours, but many communities in the Commonwealth were included as co-defendants on that lawsuit. All right, and then the last thing, I just wanted to give you a heads up that at our next meeting, I will be presenting my goals for the district, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that at that time. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's coming.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I think I'm going to call up Mr. Rooney to talk about our legal address.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Fairly early in the process, after the community had voted to support the initiative for us to get a new high school, someone was looking at the plans and asked me, what the address was going to be, because obviously this property sits at 100 Rathbun Willer Drive, and they just made the assumption that since it was going a little bit further down the street, that there would be a numerical change. I said that I didn't really know the answer to that. And then as I stepped away from it and started to reflect on it a little bit more, I saw what was what I thought an opportunity. And if you go back to some of the issues that we had that we have had with this current building and the separation between the superintendent's entrance and where the principal's entrance lies. Many years ago, we worked with then Mayor Dumas to put in an unofficial street sign on the principal's driveway that is called Blue Pride Way. And so started to think about it and realized that, you know, the County Street High School had its address. The Rathman Willard campus, this current campus, has its address. And so I approached the superintendent about the possibility of navigating the process to see about locating the new high school at its own distinct address. And, you know, I can't think of any better way than, you know, to reflect all of the excitement and the support that we've received from the community and the number of people that have worked so tirelessly to make this a reality. To really, you know, just polish it off by putting the new high school on 1 Blue Pride Way. And so obviously you decide, you know, where your buildings are located. But I have done some pre-work with Mr. Tyler, the DPW superintendent. I have presented to Mr. Larson's subcommittee. I've worked with Jack Jacoby, who's the vice chair of the School Building Commission. And if you feel that it's a good idea, you know, we are poised to move forward. There would be the need for an MOU between the city and the school department for the plowing and the maintenance of 1 Blue Pride Way, which incidentally, just to avoid any confusion, the semicircular driveway that will be in front of the new entrance, that's what we would refer to as Blue Pride Way. So I believe the process would be that it has to be decided here, but then gets sent to City Council for official adoption.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rooney. Just a little bit more of the legal background. So the City Council has to approve the public street, and I think they've because it's the high school and under our purview, they've you know, kind of looked. They want us to endorse it before they accept it as a public street. It is just the little, well, not little, but the curve that would be accepted as a public street in the city of Attleboro called Blue Pride Way. And then after that, what would happen is there'd be a memorandum of understanding that would be worked out between the schools and the city, where the schools took back some the responsibility for snow plowing, et cetera, that the city normally would have with the public street. But since this is becoming a public street for the purpose of the address, and it's a small area, we would still maintain the upkeep requirements. I think that's it.
It would be reflected in the 911 system. It would be reflected, you know, in any GPS, you know, app that you used. You know, it would be official.
So I would entertain a motion to forward to the Attleboro City Council the proposal to change the official address of Attleboro High School from 1 Rathman Willard to 1 Blue Pride Way.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll let you deliver the good news.
Sir?
I said I'll let you deliver the good news.
Oh, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Regan to discuss our Mcas results.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. While we're getting that up, I just wanted to start the presentation, as we always do, by acknowledging that the Mcas is not a perfect assessment, and we recognize that it's only one data point, and when it's included with other information that we collect on our students on a regular basis, that's when it becomes something that we can use to inform our decisions and then help to prioritize what's most important for us and our students. So So our goals for tonight, I would like to highlight that there were several differences with this year's test administration as compared to previous years. Next, I'd also like to share how the 2021 data closely aligns with the state results, as well as the difference between our 2019 data and our 2021 data. And we'll conclude the presentation with our takeaways and next steps. So in 2021, the State Department of Education provided several flexibilities to states, including extending the testing window, giving the state assessment remotely, and then also shortening the testing to prioritize in-person learning. And so in grades 3 through 8, what DESE did is they extended our test administration window to the point where some of our students were taking tests all the way up until the end of the school year. And they also shortened the testing experience for our students where they only provided one session in ELA, math, and science. This year, students who were learning remotely, or last year, students who were learning remotely were also given the option to take the assessment remotely. And some students took advantage of that opportunity. One of the other changes is that DESE requested and received a waiver for federal accountability requirements, and so the board approved for that, so that DESE would refrain from announcing accountability regulations, and so the commissioner has decided to not announce schools that are underperforming. Another change is that for high school students, the board also voted to allow students in the class of 22 to be awarded a modified competency determination. And so what that means is that as long as the student has earned full credit in an ELA or a math class, then they would receive the competency determination. The number of sessions and the time for students that were testing in grade 10 did not change, so everything remained the same for them. In science also, because there was the suspension of MCAS in 2020, students in the class of 23 are also eligible for the modified competency determination. And I think, of course, this goes without saying that the interruptions that we faced due to the pandemic need to be kept in mind, as our goal this past year, as we heard, was to keep students engaged, to establish those relationships with our students, and then to maintain our vigilance to everyone's health and safety. Okay, so in looking at this chart, the colored bar chart represents the 2021 state results for ELA. And it shows the percentage of students that were exceeding in blue, the percentage of students that were meeting the expectations in green, percentage of students partially meeting the expectation in orange, and the students that were not meeting the expectation in red. The blue line in the middle of the bar chart represents where Attleboro Public Schools results fell for 2021. And so for the most part, you can see that the district's percentage of meeting and exceeding expectations align with the state's performance, with a few outliers there. So if the blue line is near where the green and the orange meet, then you know that we were pretty much in line. And if it is a little bit below in the green, then you know we were slightly below. And on slides further on, you'll see that the blue line is hovering in the orange. That means that we were slightly above the state's percentage. On average, in English language arts, in grades 3 through 8, the state's average was about 46%. So you can see we're hovering right within that range. This chart also follows the same format, just in mathematics. So the state performance is in the colored bar chart, and our performance is in the blue line. Again, we align with the state's performance with a few outliers in particular grades. And you'll see that the state's average for 2021 is about 33% right there. Here are the 2021 state and APS science achievement results. Again, you'll see the close alignment with our results and the state. Again, there's no high school results because students were provided the opportunity for the modified competency determination. So in this bar chart, it shows the 2021 APS results, and on the blue line actually represents our 2019 results. So here you'll see how much the interruption of the pandemic impacted our results for ELA. On average for us, there was about a 10% decline. And you'll see in grade 10, all the way over to the right, that we did perform better in 2021 than we did in 2019 by about 7%. And this is because I know that the English department at the high school has been working pretty diligently to look at their curriculum and change some of the elements that are associated in those units. Yes, Mr. Withers.
I think this is one of the presentations and data that is it's discouraging but expected, I think, because of what we've gone through and what, well, students across the country have gone through the last 2 years. So with the decline, how does the 10% decline compare with the state average in
Right.
per decline?
So we had a 10% decline, and the state's average decline was about 6%. So I attribute our increased decline because our students need our teachers. Our teachers are the ones who truly make a difference, and you can see the impact here with the difference between where the state's, where we would typically fall with the blue line and where we ended up falling this school year. So our teachers weren't able to do what they are typically able to do for our students: personalized instruction, meet students where they are, see them on a regular basis. And I think that really impacted our ability to make the gains that we typically do.
Mr. Hill?
But I am interested in the outlier of the 10th grade, though, because that showed the increase. And that's certainly an outlier, but that seems to me to kind of defy what you just said there, right?
Yeah, there were a couple outliers if you were to look in other areas too. And I know that the high school, a lot of the work that they did during the pandemic required them to do a lot of work on their own independently through the Google Classroom and things like that. And so I think that's one of the silver linings of all of this, is that we learned that there are new ways of learning, new ways of accessing information, and that could be one of the ways. But we're still digging into the individual details of the results and trying to learn more information about what this is presenting to us.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What were, in your opinion, some of the blocks that prevented our teachers from being able to do their job outside of the fact that we were in a hybrid remote? What were some of the other things that maybe were lacking that could have helped us bridge that gap?
I think one of the things is that our students weren't with us every single day, and so just that alone, I think, speaks volumes, because they're able to, particularly in the lower levels, and that's where you saw much of the bigger gaps. They weren't able to meet with students on a regular basis in small groups and kind of make adjustments to practice and see which particular skills they needed more support with and those that didn't. And so I think that's what really makes the difference. Our teachers really know our students. They know their strengths, they know the areas that they need more support, and I think that's where a lot of the interruption fell for our students.
Sure. And do you think part of that may have been, I know it took us a while to get our student staff with Chromebooks to be used on a regular basis. leading up to the pandemic, our district was behind compared to some other local districts. Do you think that may or may not have contributed to students being comfortable on the Chromebooks, or maybe not as much?
I think there are many factors that contributed to it. That maybe was one, but I don't think it was like everything that contributed to it.
Sure.
We turned that around pretty quickly, and we were able to have devices in all of our students' hand fairly quickly in the start of the school year. So, I think there were many things that contributed to that.
I agree. It's
Yeah.
definitely a many-faceted situation.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, and looking at the math results, again, the chart shows the 2021 APS results on the colored bar chart, and the blue line represents our performance in 2019. So overall in math, there was about a 20% decline, and this was something that I think the Department of Education quickly realized as the results were coming into them, and they put together or they allocated resources and supports for schools and districts that I'll talk about more later in the presentation. And so the state average in grades 3 through 8 was about 33%, and in 29% in 2019 the average was about 49%. So there was about a 16% decline there on average. As far as science is concerned, again, you'll see the difference between our 2021 scores and our 2019. So what are our takeaways? And I mentioned this before. I think after reflecting and reviewing on what we do on a day-to-day basis and looking at this data, it was apparent that our teachers truly make the difference in our students' learning. They support our teachers and our support staff. Were not able to do what they know how to do. They were not able to personalize instruction the way that they typically were able to, and they were not able to consistently meet with students in person to gauge their learning and then make real-time adjustments as they saw and needed to be adjusted. And many of them at the same time were managing their own COVID world at home, and so all of those things put together made it difficult. So in thinking about how we'll use this information, so again, like I said at the start of the presentation, is one data point, and we will use this one data point with all the other data that we've collected since the beginning of the school year to look at some trends, patterns, target instruction, and then support all of our students and where they are.
Mr. Hill?
Just in terms of the data, do you know how the remote students did on a whole?
I do.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yep. So our remote students across the state, they scored fairly similar. There wasn't a statistical difference, but for us, our ELA remote students scored about 37%, meeting and exceeding, and in grades 3 through 8, and in the state, across the state, they scored about 41%. And in math, the APS in grades 3 through 8 scored 21% for meeting and exceeding if they were taking it remotely, and in person scored about 29%. So a little bit of a difference, but still close.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Storrs, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. So, safe to say, thank goodness we fought so hard for hybrid, because the remote you're saying the remote was much lower than the others?
Yeah, it was a slight decline, but not a significant one.
That disagrees, but anyway.
Well, there was a significant one in
You can
math.
agree all you want. That's fine.
Significant one in math. It was about an 8%.
But my main question is really this. We're seeing a 10% reduction, obviously, because of the situation in ELA, 20% in math. And this is something that's going to be hard to catch up on as the years move forward. So the question is, how are we going to catch up? Are we going to see us like, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Is this going to get back to normal, or is this going to be a continuing decline as the students move forward?
I don't think I don't think it'll continue to decline. One of the things that we'll be using as part of the support for math, and I talked about this earlier, is that DESE right away put together acceleration grants and resources through the summer. We took advantage of that. We received one of the DESE math acceleration grants, and so we were able to purchase some programs and supports specifically for math. It will take some time for us to recoup that, but I think one of the other things that DESE has really pushed forward and that we're also adopting too is that we think about this year as more of an opportunity to meet students where they are, make sure that we're maintaining teaching grade level standards, and then providing the necessary scaffolds and remediation if necessary for students if they need some skills to be able to close those gaps, but really to maintain the grade level standards that we know our students can do with the supports in place.
So I realize MCAS is one data point, but I mean, to be honest, and not directed at Attleboro Public Schools, this is a presentation that makes me very angry. It shows what was taken away from our students, our kids, for a year and a half by what's happened, and that's not even getting into the social and emotional damage that was done to a lot of them, and it just wasn't well thought out what was done to these kids, and you can see in the numbers the results. And I have full faith in the administration that we will do, you know, that the administration and our teachers will do great work to get students back on track where they need to be, but they still lost a year and a half, and it's still going to take time, and that's still it's just disheartening to see, and it's not directed at Attleboro Public Schools because I don't think it's obviously not unique to us. It just it shows, you know, it's one way to just really see the impact it had on our kids. Mr. Domenici?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Mr. Storrs brought up a point, and it's one that that frustrates me a little bit about the MCAS, is that it's going to take another year for us to really know how we did this year. Like, there has to be some better ways for assessment. And is there going to be a way, even like in the spring, or like how can we check in or have you check in to let us know, you know, based on our own staff, our own educators' assessments, as to how our students are doing?
Yeah, we can definitely present more information to show how we've grown since our own baseline data that we've presented or that we've provided to students at the start of this year, and then how they're performing in the spring.
'Cause, you know, we have to wait till October of next year to say how did we do on the MCAS in the spring. So it always frustrates me, but even more so this year, considering what we've lost.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson?
Oh,
Yeah, good.
just a follow-up question on the remote part. I don't want to harp on this too much, but I'm interested. You said the aggregate was lower. Are there silver linings within there, or did you break it out grade by grade in terms of the stuff? I'm just wondering. I understand. I think the remote, my own personal theory is that the remote did not work well for the lower grades, and so that might have skewed the results. I mean, I can only go based on what I saw from my family, and that the Algebra 2 was pretty rigorous. It was about 2 months ahead of where the students were. So in my experience in that one, you know, I don't want to extrapolate too much from that, but I feel like that was a pretty good curriculum that they went through. So I would be interested to learn more just on that part to see, because all the points made, there's no doubt that there was some loss, but I think the part that would be interesting to find out is, are there learnings that we can take from this? Is there stuff that we can learn that will augment? And you know, this is not saying that teachers are incredibly valuable, but perhaps, you know, with the flipped classroom, using a program like Edgenuity to teach material at home so that things can be processed. So I would love to hear some more in that regard.
Yeah, I can definitely. I only pulled out total grades 3 through 8, remote and in-person scores in each of the content areas, but I can definitely break that out by grade level.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, so the comment earlier about, remote versus hybrid and how the remote students may not have performed as well. I think something we need to keep in mind too is that they weren't necessarily on the same level ground as their peers who were participating in hybrid. Many families opted for remote because of health issues going on within their own family, and the stress and potential trauma that those students were dealing with, in addition to maintaining their academics. The fact that they scored as well as they did, I think, speaks well to the other skills and adaptive measures that they may have learned during that time. So, while yes, I'm glad that we were able to vote for hybrid for our students for as long as we did, I don't think that we should necessarily discredit the work that those students were doing that were full remote.
Yeah, I agree. I think everyone did their best. I just think, I look at this and I look at what happened, and, we should have had kids back in school full time, not just here, but across the country. I mean, I think that's a philosophical discussion for another day. Mr. Domenici.
Just a quick question, and this could be tomorrow at subcommittee.
Yep.
Do you have the breakdown of like the percentage of our students who didn't meet at all versus partially met?
I do.
Because that part was not evident on here.
Yep.
And I think sometimes that tells a story too. So that could be something we talk about tomorrow. Thank you.
This is Storrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Usually when we look at MCAS, we also get into the subgroups. So I see that's missing here. Did we see the same sort of declines in the subgroups, or was it different?
Yeah, the subgroups showed the same type of declines.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that that the Department of Ed had cautioned us when they were sharing the data with us is to look at the overall aggregate data more than the individual subgroup data. They said that that's important, it's good for you to take a look at, but really knowing that this data is being used as a diagnostic to support individual students and to see where they fell, they wanted us to really, keep it high level when we were having these conversations. So, but we can definitely take a close look at that as well. So as Mr. Chairman Withers talked about before with the silver linings, so there were a few silver linings. And I think our students learned how to be resilient. Our students and staff learned how to be resilient when they, were faced with something that was very challenging. They learned how to push through or to bounce back from that. We also learned how to be very flexible through all of this. And then we also learned that there were, we had to engage in new ways of learning and accessing information, new ways that we had never thought were even possible before. So I think we have the pandemic to thank for that. So next steps, as for our next steps, we worked through the spring and summer to create our engagement and attendance plan. We wanted to make sure that our students had a sense of belonging within our schools, and we also wanted to be able to put the supports in place that they needed so that they could feel connected and successful when they returned back to school this year. We also are going to continue to collect our data to inform our instruction. That's just something that we typically do, and that's what we'll continue to do. And as I already mentioned, we did receive the DESE grant for accelerating mathematics, and I already mentioned as well that we're really focusing on acceleration versus remediation and maintaining their grade level standards versus filling holes and just continually remediating. So. One final thing that I did also want to report is that the Mcas reports that are sent home to families will be sent home on October 15th. So please look for them. They'll be sent home with your students. And I know, as we've mentioned already, this is just one data point. And please keep that in mind when you're taking a look at your student's report.
Thank you, Ms. Regan.
Any questions? Any further questions?
Any other questions? Thank you. I know it's not an easy presentation to give, especially under these circumstances, so I appreciate you, all the work that went into it and taking the arrows that weren't by any means directed at you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That concludes my report.
All right. Next on our agenda tonight, we have minutes from our last meeting of September 13th, 2021. The minutes were circulated with your materials. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or edits? All those in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda, I'll read the list and then entertain the motion. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,000 from the United Way of Rhode Island to the Attleboro High School volleyball team to be deposited in gifts donation line at the high school. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from Target to the gifts donation line at the high school. Motion to accept payment in the amount of $3.50 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts. Motion to accept the contractual obligation in the amount of $99.50 from Planet Aid Inc. as broken down on the check receipt dated September 23rd, 2021. Motion to accept the following books from the Rachel Brannigan Educational Foundation with a total value of $85.45. A Year in New England by Diane Treichler, $16.99 value. Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson, $17.99 value. The Catman of Aleppo by Lathan and Shamsi Basha, $17.99 value. We Dream of Space by Erin Estrada Kelly, $16.99 value. And Starfish by Lisa Phipps, $15.49 value.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's passed. Thank you. Next, we have our subcommittee reports. We will start with infrastructure and facilities, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Domenici.
Thank you, Chairman. We met back on September 15th. We had a few items, so I'll try to be as quick as possible with the updates. MSBA, sounds like a broken record, but on time, on budget. They did let us know we added a maintenance section to the extension of the building. That design's been completed. It's as they call it, aesthetically positive to the building. It looks like it would have been there the whole time. It doesn't look like an add-on. And then the last point on the new high school is that they are looking for a potential tour to be planned sometime around the end of November for us, and I think potentially the council and other elected folk. Moving forward to the gym floors for Hill Robertson, Hyman Fine. At the time of our meeting, we didn't have too much of an update other than that the project had been turned over to the Municipal Building Commission. Since that time, we got I received an update that the product owner had been selected, the purchase order had been put in place for the project owner, and that I think we all got our update last Friday, where the project owner came in and determined that the floors that the council had asked for above what we originally recommended would not work without some cement work and some challenges to getting rid of the stuff underneath the floor. So I think we're back to what we had originally planned. So that's with the Municipal Building Commission, and we'll get updates, I guess, as they progress on that project. We also had so Studley's facade work has been completed. It was by all accounts a great job done. We had a local contractor named Jeff DiMarzio that came in, and he actually reduced his bid in order to accommodate the funds that were allocated for the job. So we just wanted to give a little notice of appreciation to Mr. DiMarzio for doing that. The Willett facade work has not yet been completed. The mayor has committed to funding these repairs once free cash has been certified, usually in the fall, early winter. So after that, we'll begin the process of putting a contractor in place to do that work. We also got an update on Thatcher's elementary side entrance update. That parking lot work has not yet been completed. The council has approved the work to be done, so this is with DPW to be completed. So I'm not sure if we're waiting for any free cash certification there or not, but we're waiting on the DPW's. It's on their radar. Mr. Geddes.
Thank you, Mr. Domenici. Just going back to the Willett facade, you said we're waiting for free cash certification, but and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought at one of our previous meetings, Mr. Larson, through Budget and Finance, had mentioned that as we're looking at a significant budget gap that was supposed to be covered by the free cash certification. Am I misremembering, or?
I think it's two separate items.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I can elaborate if you want me to, but that's fine. It's two items, two separate things.
Okay.
Agreed.
I'll take your word for it. Just wanted to confirm that I was misremembering. Thank you.
Just a quick update on the Wamsutta Middle School. The roof and structural issues, actually both for the structural concern at Wamsutta that came in after the work had been done have been addressed. And then just, we did have a hurricane during last month, and neither the roofs at Wamsutta nor Brennan leaked. So, that's a good sign for us. We also had an update on the cooling system update. And I believe, which we were talking about, this one in particular was that was at Wamsutta, right? Yeah. So, the cooling system failed. It's not yet been addressed. It would have cost us between $70,000 to $90,000 to either rent or buy a used cooling system. Instead, the cooling system will be addressed with the performance contract. And speaking to which, the public hearings, I believe, are regarding going out to bond should be happening this month. And if all goes well, there could be a signing of that performance contract next month. We'll have to do the cooling project at Wamsutta when school isn't in session, because it's a process to have to do that, which would be disruptive, I think, to learning in the building.
Scott,
Yes.
is that like a week-long project, or is it like? No.
I wish.
I'm not 100% certain how long that would be. I suspect that's a little longer than a week.
Yeah, so we'll be replacing the entire system, including the unit vents in the building, so.
So it's a summer project.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
about an 8-week deal.
Okay. Which brings us to the next topic, which we thought was going to happen this past summer, but that's the city solar projects. So clearly those did not happen over the summer as expected. We did get some updates. Mr. Furtado and I were able to meet with Jeremy, the budget director, to get a few questions opened. As we know right now, there are, I believe, all schools except, I want to say Studley and the high school will be taking part in this solar project to put solar carports arrays in the parking lots. At the moment, the timing of this project is such where they would look to begin this work in March and April of this coming year, which our subcommittee had some concerns about the timing of it, considering that that's work in areas where the staff parks and where there's pickups, drop-offs, bus. So part of the reason we met with the budget director was kind of to address those concerns. I believe the budget director has gone out to the project themselves to determine if whether or not the summer could be a better, more suitable time to do this work. As far as credits and revenues from the solar power, the budget director, we did ask the question as to what the value was, because we were never quite certain. It's estimated between the leasing agreement and the pilot that would be provided by the company, that it would provide the city with a payout of somewhere in the $2 to $2.2 million area over a 20-year period. So when you divide that out, year over year, it's not a whole lot of money. There was some questions as to whether or not any of that might come to the school budget, and that is probably not likely. However, one of the things that was explained is that they have a person on site as part of this project that is doing an assessment of all the buildings, not just in the school but the city that will be part of this project. And if it makes sense, it's possible that some of the buildings themselves may end up with the solar power behind, plugged in, as opposed to being leased out to this agency. So where it might make sense to benefit the building itself, it's possible that some of these buildings may end up with that power being connected as opposed to just leasing it out to the solar company. So they're going to do that on a building by building basis. Mr. Geddes.
Aren't we already bought into a solar farm? Didn't we go into an agreement a couple of years ago?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so the arrangement with the canopies has to do with the demand charges we pay because of the amount of power we use, and then it's not obvious and straightforward on how that math works in terms of whether the power goes in front of the meter, which means the electric company gets the power, or behind the meter, which means we would get the power. But there's some math involved, and it's really focused on the demand charge of the building and whether or not it makes sense that way. But it would not impact
because they're not touching this building and they're certainly not touching the new high school. It would not impact our arrangement with the solar farms.
Thank you.
Some of the additional follow-ups that we had with Jeremy, he did provide me like a copy, and I'll have it submitted to the administration so that we can all get copies of it. Just some high-level design ideas as to how this would work from building over building. The arrays themselves are high enough to put emergency vehicles underneath. That was another concern that we had with respect to plowing or any of that nature. All of these will come with a drainage system so that it prevents, snow buildup and water runnage into the lots. And while they think largely that, the work being done in these parking lots may not necessarily disrupt transportation in and out, clearly there would be parking concerns for staff, and some of the buildings are better suited than others to handle that. Case in point, like a Hill Roberts, you've got the access road. So you'd end up with cars on the side of the access road, which might not necessarily be pleasing to our neighbors. Hence, we brought some concerns, and though I don't have any new news from the budget director yet, I'm hopeful that perhaps this project might be something that could be done while school is not in session. Because these projects, each building will take somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks to complete. Mr. Storrs.
Thank you, Mr. Mitch. Yeah, so in that regard, I would say this: the fact that the schools aren't benefiting, maybe there will be some, some power to the schools kind of possibility where we might benefit somewhat, but generally we are not benefiting from this at all. And pretty much this was told to us, not asked of us, when it comes to the usage of the schools. My point being, if this is going to disrupt the educational process, the parking lots, the what have you, I have a concern with that. I have a big concern, and it sounds like you do as well, and
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that you posed that question. But if they come back and say, sorry, March, I think we should have a problem with that. I think that should come back before this committee, and we should have a discussion, because if this work that was told to us is happening, not requested, not part of the discussion, told to us, is going to disrupt the education of the Attleboro Public Schools, I have a big problem with that.
That's a fair point. We all did on the subcommittee as well. That was the biggest reason for meeting with the budget director. Is we don't have a problem with the project, and it's a city project. They're city buildings ultimately, but yes, we had concerns about disruption during the educational year. So we're hopeful, and we will stay on. And I will, if I get updates, I will make sure to update the full committee as we get them. We also had an update from the high school preservation issues. Mr. Geddes, I mean, you might as well be able to give some of this, but I have some notes here, so please keep me honest if I miss anything. Rob informed the subcommittee they've located a closet with archives that they've been looking for quite some time. It was like a little treasure trove. So this was kind of exciting news for us to be able to have some really cool specs, and I won't have to get into all the details, but it was quite the find. It was unexpected, so we thought that was kind of cool.
Now, where was the closet?
In the high school somewhere.
We thought it was a closet that had been confined to some boxes and filing cabinets that people suspected where they might be located. We thought it was in a stairway. We were disappointed to walk into the stairway and find it empty. Turned out it was behind a locked door next to the stairway. So up off of the B2 cafeteria, there's a closet that's loaded with yearbooks, historical photos. I think there was an annual report from 1880.
Oh wow!
Cool.
It's like when we're talking historical stuff, like the history of the Attleboro Public Schools. So it was a very exciting find. And we haven't had a chance to really go through that yet. We were talking about that before tonight's meeting. So we hope to have more details later this month.
Just some quick follow-ups. There were some other ideas about saving some items, potentially, maybe selling some to the community. Consigli, our partners at the new high school, are working with the Preservation Committee to get items tested to make sure there's no hazardous materials before retrieving and using for any of those purposes. There was discussion about farewell to the existing building. So more to come on that. And then there was some discussion, and there'll need to be further discussion on, where any money raised from anything sold would go. So, still a little ways out, but it's coming quicker than we realized, so there will be more to come. And then the last item on our agenda was, as we used to do prior to COVID, the facilities and infrastructure meetings would frequently meet at other buildings. We will be meeting at Studley Elementary in our next meeting in December. The facade work had just been done there, and at that point in time, we have some hope that some other potential work will be done in some of the other buildings, and we'll address having meetings in remote settings at that particular point in time, and kind of get back to what this committee did. Mr. Geddes.
Thank you, Mr. Domenici. One last question going back to the solar project. During the subcommittee meeting, one of the concerns that we discussed was resurfacing the lots after the installation. We were being told that wasn't going to, that they were just going to come put the solar arrays up and leave, not worry about the parking lot.
Yes.
Did that get addressed with?
It was discussed with no better answer.
Okay.
That is still the intent. So
Okay.
where we thought we potentially, because some of these parking lots could probably use it, and we figure with that kind of disruption, there might be some potential opportunity, but that is not going to
Still
happen.
not part of the
That's
plan.
not part of this plan for this work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I know you mentioned the articles that you found in the closet. I know for the new high school, we're planning on making something like a time capsule to represent the old schools and everything that came from it. So is that something that we could use in the time capsule once obviously they get tested for everything?
I imagine there would be some opportunity.
Yeah,
we probably
so-
want to display some of these items.
Yeah, so one of the members of the group is actually from Attleboro's Historical Commission and the Attleboro Historical Society. So we're going to try to plan a time, hopefully before Thanksgiving, to actually go through, to take hours and go through all these boxes and see what might be able to go to City Hall, because we also have a part of the new high school that hasn't been fully designed yet that is going to be a tribute to the history of the high school. So we expect some of those items will go there. The Alumni Association, we know, has a full catalog of yearbooks, and the Attleboro Public Library has them digitized, but both of those groups might be interested. The Industrial Museum, we're covering everything. So I time capsule-wise, I'm sure some stuff that we'll find, just looking past Mr. Sawyer tonight, I realized one space we hadn't checked is all of the filing cabinets in that double ACS closet. There's probably a ton of stuff in there. So we're really checking for anything that we think might be of historical significance and value to commemorate somewhere in the district or within the city.
Great, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for thinking of it.
I'm a little confused. So where do we think this stuff came from?
A former high school history teacher,
Okay.
Diane
That's
Spatcher.
that's what I thought. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted. Thank you.
Generations of high school
But
alum.
she donated that stuff.
Yeah, she collected, donated, tracked, cataloged, all of it.
Yeah, okay.
And she put it in a closet throughout various iterations
yeah.
of, yeah.
Okay.
It-
Yeah,
it
she
got
used to
moved
teach
around.
the history of Attleboro class.
Yep.
That's what it was going to be. I was going to suggest
Yeah.
we contact her.
Yeah.
That completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Domenici. Our final subcommittee report is Policy and Personnel. Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee met on September 20th. All motions were voted out of the committee unanimously. I'm going to do them in groups as I always do. So the first section is motions to note the review date. Policy ACA, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. ACE, non-discrimination on the basis of disability. Policy Exhibit ADDA-R1 for Requirement 1, DCJIS Model Corey Policy, and IMG-E1 Exhibit 1 Guidelines for Animals in School Settings. So all these policies either align with MASC or continue to meet the district's needs. So as such, no changes are being sought. So all these came out. So I'll put it up to the floor that all four, unless somebody wants me to bring them up individually, please let me know. So all four of these policies and or exhibits to note the review date. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the next section is some edits. I'll go through each one. Policy AC, non-discrimination. In many places, our policy does match mask policy. One section that we found was that the first paragraph and the second paragraph had some redundant language about the different groups. So we combined those two paragraphs to get rid of the redundancy. For the most part, other than that, it aligns with masks policy, or is continues to meet the needs of the district. Policy ADDA, background checks. Policy aligns with masks, but in the second paragraph, we are making some minor wording changes and just noting the review date. Exhibit GCG E1, substitute pay rates. The administration has added the building substitute information for clarification purposes, and we are removing the effectivity date that was at the top of indicating January 1st. As the motion moves forward, it continues to apply as is. And lastly, policy IHBG, homeschooling. Administration reviewed the policy, recommends inserting a paragraph for enrolling APS, in a section for enrolling in APS, a paragraph describing that. So, again, all these were voted out unanimously, so I'm going to put them up to a motion. Yes, Bob?
When you were talking about thanks, by the way,
Yep.
when you were talking about the substitute pay edits, were there any policy edits? Were there any talk about the actual pay of the substitute?
Yes, if the administration could please talk to that. Julie?
So the only edits to the policy were just that we have the pay rates in the policy that dictate substitute pay based on daily sub, long-term sub, building sub. One of the things that was not included there that we felt should be is that we do have building subs who continue to work year to year. And there wasn't anything in there speaking of a rate for them to increase.
Okay.
So
I just didn't know, given the supply and demand issues here, if there was
we did look at
discussion
the
about raising
substitute
the
pay rates last year, I believe, and did kind of an analysis of districts, and so we did increase our substitute rates last year. And then, of course, the daily sub rate increases every year as the minimum wage increases in Massachusetts to get to that $15 an hour.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions on this group of policies? All right. So I'll put it to the floor to approve the 3 policies and exhibit as presented.
So moved.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, great. Next, we're looking to take our policy IMG, animals in school, and align it with the mask policy. We were mainly aligned with mask, and now we're going to fully align with mask. Is there any questions, discussion regarding IMG, animals in school? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any nays? Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Next, we have a new policy that the administration recommends, policy GBEBE, employee attendance. This policy is needed to, it's just a 3-paragraph policy, but it gives the districts expectation when it comes to appropriately using vacations and time off and sick time and stuff of that nature. Is a good way to summarize it. Agree? Good. Is there any questions regarding GBEBE? Yes, please.
Yeah, I have no problem with the policy itself. I was just more curious about the background, just kind of thinking about like, asking what problem it's trying to get at and the extent of the problem.
Fair question. I will definitely let the administration respond to that one.
I'll just stay here. So thank you. We have, as discussed in the past several years, had concern about our attendance rates district-wide from all staff, ranging, from 88 to 92% attendance rate, depending on groupings of staff. Attendance also came up in December of 2019 when DESE came to do our district review and found that our attendance rates were significantly lower than the state average attendance, and so we have been taking steps to attempt to improve our attendance rates, some of which were addressed in the AEA contract with target attendance for total number of days off before, after holidays, weekends, vacations, and then just total attendance rate. So we do have language in our employee handbook that speaks to, regular attendance of employees and the way they go about taking days. We felt like a policy to support that language was needed.
Yeah.
Yep.
In terms of the, looking at the aggregate number, and is there a group of outliers who bring that average down?
We have some, not really. We have just, it's kind of spread pretty consistently across the district. I mean, there are some groups that are a little bit higher than others, but.
I'm interested in, like, in the policy where it says excessive absences or excessive, I feel like a lot of our teachers are very professional and follow it. So,
absolutely.
So out of the, how many teachers would be directly affected by that excessive part right now, would you say?
I don't have an actual number
for
that.
Like, is it a 10 or is it a 100?
It is not 10. I wouldn't even want to throw out a number. The majority of our staff come to work when they're supposed to and don't have excessive absences.
I'm just trying to get a sense. So is it like a 5% problem or a 10% problem? I mean, 10% of 400, right, is 40 people, so.
Couple percentage at the most,
yeah,
right?
It's go ahead.
And it's very important to note this has been vetted through the lab, and it is fully expected by the lab and the staff.
And how has it been handled, I guess, with the staff handbook and stuff like that?
It's tricky, right? We initially, when we brought this to the lab last year, had started out with a number of days. A lot of places will have, 6 occurrences in a 12-month period of time. You start down a discipline path, right? The lab didn't feel comfortable putting a number to anything. So they kind of, because again, our staff, people are out, right? People have needs and they're out. And for the most part, we try to be flexible with their needs based on, the circumstances. And so we don't want to take that ability from administrators away. But when you don't have something to specifically point to, like a document or an employee handbook, sometimes you get pushback from that, right? To say, well, there's nothing here that says I can't do A, B, and C, right? And so this is just to support, and again, excessive is, and patterns, do you take every Friday off? Or do you take Fridays off consistently? Or Mondays? Or before vacations and things like that. So, kind of the metric that we're aiming for is the same as what we ask our students, right? We ask our students to be here 98% of the time. Our staff should be role models for that, and to have that same metric met. So most do, but there's some that don't.
Yeah, I'm just kind of reading between the lines there. I hear you saying that if there's not a policy and it doesn't have the teeth to really, so people, maybe perhaps a principal will have a conversation with someone, but unless they have the policy, you won't have the teeth to really do what it's supposed to do.
It helps to support them in their discussions with staff.
Okay.
Mr. Gettis?
And I will say it was enough of a concern during our last collective bargaining with the AEA that that, to the administration's credit, rather than going through the punitive process, it became an incentive, incentivizing language was put into the contract with the effort of improving attendance, and this is kind of the backbone to that incentive. So,
thanks for the background.
Any other questions regarding GBEBE employee attendance? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. And the last section, Julie, if you'd stay there, I'm going to have you talk to the handbook in a moment. But the last section is exhibits, as we've been doing for a little while now, probably the last 4 or 5 years. We've been working towards getting rid of exhibits from the policy binder and moving it to more of a procedure binder. So these 3 policies all fall in that realm. IHBGE1 Home Education Application Procedure, and IHGBE2 Application for Home Education. Those are really just the forms and such that a parent needs to fill out to be able to request to do homeschooling. And IMG-E2 Animals in School Notification Form, which speaks to a lot of the same thing that's already in the policy. So, and again, those things are being moved over to the procedural binder. Any questions regarding these? So we are looking, the motion that came out of the committee was to remove these from the policy binder. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And the last section that we talked about at the meeting was a memo regarding some updates and edits to the ACA and ELC handbook. And I'll allow the administration, please, to speak to that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Storrs. The ELC handbook included updates on their arrival and dismissal procedures. The ACA handbook included a revised mission statement and principles created by the new administration and its staff. It also included information about the class speaker to be comprised of a group of students and staff to select the speaker at graduation. Cell phones are locked in something called a yonder pouch. So when they arrive, it's locked into this pouch and kept in a secure location up until dinner. Then students then are given the phone, and then after dinner, it goes back into the pouch until classes are done for the evening. And then the attendance guidelines were also revised to be more, so students will be more accountable for their attendance on a daily basis.
So the memorandum was provided with the packet, effectively a 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and a little bit page memorandum summarizing the things the administration just spoke to. Any questions regarding the changes and edits to the ACA and ELC handbook? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, so that approves everything that came out of the last policy subcommittee. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Storrs. That concludes our subcommittee reports tonight. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, I don't see anyone, so I'll go ahead and close open forum. Mr. Larson.
The public hearing that Mr. Domenici referenced about the performance contract is actually tomorrow night. Unless there's any major objection, I would like to speak at the public hearing on behalf of projects going forward. On behalf of the school committee.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business? All right, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.